Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Data Science Daily series. And what we will cover today is a very important concept in Python called control flow statements. So you're writing code. How do you actually control, right? How you want the code to flow. So what you can do is you can put conditions in your code that if this particular situation happens, then only you go ahead and execute the remaining code. Otherwise, do something else, right? So you're trying to control the flow of the code, and we will shortly see how this works. But what we have discussed so far in the Python bootcamp is we have covered what is Python. We have talked about how to install it, how to install the Jupyter interface, talked about the basic data types, and also we had a quiz on the data types in the last session. So in this session, without further any ado, let's get started. All right. So hope you can open up your Jupyter notebooks as well, and let's follow along with this class. And this material is already there in the comments in the chat. So make sure you are downloading it. Right, it's free for download as well. You're downloading it, going through it, and if possible, following along with this class. All right. So let's get started. Control flow statements in Python. So the first cell, as always, is just increasing the width of the notebook. And this is the agenda for today. First, we will have a quick recap of the comparison operators, right? Why this is important is because based on certain comparison operators, you can define the flow that you want your code to take. Then we will talk about the control flow statements themselves. Like there is conditional statements like if, else, else if. There are, so this will also have else if. And then there is loops, right? For loop, while loop. There are certain loop operations we will talk about, mainly break and continue. And then we will see how do nested loops work out. So let's get started. A quick recap of the comparison operators. So we have these 6 operators listed up, right? Greater than, lesser than, greater than or equal to, lesser than or equal to, right? So the last two are important. Equal to, when you want to compare something, just a reminder, it is two equal to signs, right? And that becomes a comparison operator. And the output of that comparison will be a Boolean, true or false. Similarly, not equal to is exclamation mark and exclamation mark and equal to sign. And this is basically the operator for not equal to. All right. Now let's come to conditional statements. These statements control the program flow based on whether a condition is true or false. The first statement that we are going to look at is the if statement. Now the if statement executes a code of block if the specified condition evaluates to true. Only if the condition is true, only then will that code block within this if statement actually get executed. So let's take an example, right? I've set a variable age to be 18. And what I'm now saying is if age is greater than equal to 18, colon, and then in the next line, print you are eligible to vote. And notice that there is an indentation, right? There is an indentation. So what this statement is doing is if it's first checking if age is greater than equal to 18, and if this statement holds true, if the output of this statement is true, right, then only it will go ahead and print. So let's try this. Age is 18 and I'm running this. It's saying you are eligible to vote. But what about if it's 15, right? It will not return anything for us, right? Because this condition is not satisfied. So basically this print statement will not get executed at all. But this is not what we always want, right? If the condition is not satisfied, we also want to return something that, let's say you're not eligible to vote. That is exactly where the if else statement comes in. Now the else statement provides an alternative block of code to execute if the condition in the if statement is false, right? So if age is 15, right, and what you are going to basically execute is you are going to say if age is greater than equal to 18, print this, else print this. And one thing to keep in mind is the indentation. Keep in mind the indentation. right? Now, let me just clean up the indentation, right? Yeah. So if age is greater than equal to 18, print you're eligible to vote. Else, right? Now, what else will do is it will take all the conditions where age is less than equal to 18, right? Print you're not eligible to vote yet. So if age is 15, it will print you're not eligible to vote yet. And if it is 18, it will print you're eligible to vote. Now, what if I put age is A, right? It will not be able to basically understand this, right? Although you could think that, okay, age is not greater than equal to 18 because age is a string, right? And it's not greater than equal to 18. But what happens is this is an error. You cannot, so Python tries to understand if age is greater than equal to 18 and it's not able to compute this Boolean, right? Because these are two different data types. So it returns an error, right? It does not go ahead and print you're not eligible to vote yet. So that's something to keep in mind how this is working beneath the hood. All right. Now we can only do two statement checks, right? Or we can do two actions if we have only an if and an else statement. Now you also have something called an else if statement. So what else if statements help us do is basically they help us define multiple conditions and execute multiple blocks of code. Now, so what else statement allows for checking multiple conditions sequentially? It is used within an if statement block. All right, so if grade is B here, I can define an if and else statement code like this. If grade is equal to A, print excellent work. Else if grade double equal to B or is equal to B, print good job. Else print keep practicing. And if grade is B, you will see that it is prints good job. Right? I can also have something like this, where else if grade is equal to C, print you have an average grade, right? All right, let's just make this consistent. Right, so this indentation, just a reminder, this is 4 space bars. Right, so I've just cleaned this up. Now, what we are doing here is we are saying grade is equal to C, right? Now, what will happen is we have nested two else if statements here. So what this will do is it will print you have an average grade. And that's what exactly it is printing. So I have nested, I have kept two else if statements, right? And the beauty of these statements is you can, only keep the if and the else if statement as well. So if I keep like this, right, I remove this, it will not print anything because grade is not equal to A and grade is not equal to B as well, right? Grade is C right now. So if you print grade, the variable grade is C. So you have defined if and then else if. So none of these two conditions are met. If you would have kept it else here, right, it would have basically taken every grade other than the string A. So it would have printed good job, right? But here what you're doing is in the else if, you are actually checking whether grade is equal to B, but it is not equal to B. So nothing is getting printed. I hope this concept is very, very clear. All right. If it's not clear, make sure you're watching this again and getting very, very clear with this. So what if and else statements are doing are they are helping execute certain blocks of code if the condition holds true, right? What they are checking for. All right. Now let's come to loops. So what are loops? Loops are another type of a control flow statement. Loops allow for executing a block of code repeatedly, and here repeatedly is the catch, until a certain condition is met. So while the conditional statements help us execute blocks of code if the condition is met, loops help execute a block of code repeatedly, right, until a certain condition is met, basically. Now there are two main loops. One is the for loop. The for loop iterates over a sequence of items like a list, tuple, or string. and executes the code block for each item. So let's understand what this is doing. So I have defined a list: fruits, apple, banana, orange. And what I'm now saying is, for fruit in fruits, print I like that particular fruit. So what is this doing? Right? What is for fruit in fruits doing? And remember, you all need to have a colon mark after the control flow statements. Right? That's how Python understands that this is a control flow statement. Otherwise, it will not be able to understand. Right? So how does this work? Now it's saying for each fruit in this list. So first fruit, this fruit, right? This will take the value of apple and it will print I like apple. That is the first print that's coming. Then it will go back, it is iterating, right? So it will go back to the next element, banana. So fruit, this variable will take the value of banana and it will then print I like banana, right? Because fruit now has the value of banana. And then it will go back to the fruits list and take the next element, which is orange. So fruit, now this variable fruit will become orange, and then inside this it will print I like orange. So what it is doing is, it is basically printing based on this loop. It's basically printing I like fruit. Now what I could have done is, let's say I kept this fixed, I like banana. What do you think would happen? And let me take this in a separate code block actually. So if I would have put I like banana, what do you think would have happened? What would happen? Right? So you're defining fruit as a variable, but it's not getting referenced in the print statement. So there are three elements in the list fruits. So basically, I like banana will be printed thrice. And that's it. Because in your internal statement, you have not referenced the variable itself of fruit. So you're just printing I like banana thrice. All right. So this is the for loop. Now, for loop generally iterates over a sequence of items. It's not checking a particular condition as such. The while loop is actually checking a condition and executing a block of code repeatedly till that condition is met, right? As long as a specified condition remains true. So this is the primary difference between a for loop and a while loop. Now, if count is equal to 1, right? I have said count is equal to 1. And what I'm saying is, in this while loop, while count is less than equal to 5, right? And again, a colon mark, remember this. Let me also correct the indentation. While count is less than equal to 5, print count, right? So when count is 1, it will print 1. And then it is saying count plus equal to 1. Now remember what this is doing. Count plus equal to 1 is the same as count is equal to count plus 1. So I'm changing the value of count now, right? So I'm initializing first count as 1. Then in this while loop, I'm first printing that count variable, which is 1. And then I am saying count is equal to count plus 1. So count is now becoming 2. And it is going back to the top of the while loop, where this condition is again getting checked. Is count less than equal to 5? That is true, right? 2 is less than equal to 5. Then it is coming back inside the loop. It is printing 2. Again, in the next line, it is incrementally increasing it. So count is now becoming 3, because count is becoming 2 plus 1, that is 3. It is again checking the condition, whether it is less than 5 or not. Less than equal to 5, it is again printing it. And this goes on occurring until count becomes 5, right? So then this condition is again checked, whether count is less than equal to 5. It prints 5. Then count becomes 6. And then this condition is no longer satisfied. So this loop breaks, right? So this loop basically breaks when count becomes 6 and you are not printing 6 anymore. So what you can see is, if I run this, it is giving me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's what's exactly happening. So this is the while loop. Make sure you understand while loop in a lot of depth just by this example. So I have explained it very, very clearly. We have gone through each line item. Make sure you're understanding what is exactly happening. So while a certain condition is met, do a particular action, right? And execute a block of code repeatedly. This is the while loop. While the for loop was actually iterating over a sequence of items and executing whatever block of code was within that for loop, right? This is the primary difference between a for and a while loop. Now let's look at certain loop operations. Now these loops will continue to execute until a certain condition is met, right? Now if you want to terminate these loops prematurely, what can you do? So you can terminate the loops prematurely using the break statement. So here you can combine the if else, else if conditional statements with these loops. Right? So you're running a loop, and what you can say if is within that loop, if a particular condition is met or not met, you can break the loop. And we will see how this works. So break statement actually exits the loop entirely, and the continue statement actually skips to the next iteration, right? So there are two main loop operations. Now let's look at the break statement. The break statement exits the loop entirely once a specific condition is met. So count is equal to 1 now, right? What I am trying to do now is I'm saying while count is less than equal to 5, this is my main condition in the while loop. If count is equal to 3 at any point, break out of the while loop, right? So I've kept this if statement within the while loop, and then I'm printing count, and I'm incrementally making count plus 1, right? Count is equal to count plus 1. So what will this do? Think through this line by line. I'll give you a second to think through what this should do, right? And you already have the answer. It will print 1 and 2. But why? Okay, so count is 1. Firstly, it's checking whether count is less than equal to 5. That's true. Now it's saying if count is equal to 3, break. So this will not get executed. This break will not get executed because count is not equal to 3. What it will then do is it will go to print. It will print 1. It will make count is equal to count plus 1. That is 1 plus 1 is 2. So count will now become 2 at the last line. It will go back to the top of the while loop. It will check whether count is less than equal to 5, which is true. So it will again go back inside the block of code. It will check whether count is 3. No, it is not. So this will be ignored. It will then print 2, and then count will become 3 because count will become 2 plus 1, that is 3. Then in the next iteration, it will go back to the top of the while loop. It will check whether count is less than equal to 5. That's true. So it will go back inside the loop. It will check whether count, now with this if statement, if count is equal to 3, that is true, right? It is equal to 3. So it will also execute the code inside this if statement, which is break. And what break will do is it will exit the loop. It will just stop this particular loop from continuing. So it will just stop at that point. And you will see that nothing is getting executed after this, right? So this is a very, very interesting example of what is happening with the break statement. Very simple example, actually. And you're only getting 1 and 2 printed. Now, if you were to do this with the continue statement, I will show an example of the continue statement once. So continue statement skips the current iteration of the loop and moves on to the next one. So taking the fruits example, you have these 3 fruits. For fruit and fruits, if fruit is equal to banana, continue. Otherwise, basically you keep on printing, I like that fruit. So when fruit is apple, right? This if statement is ignored and it will print I like apple. When it is banana, this if statement actually will get executed because this is true, and it will continue. That is, it will go back to the top of the loop. It will not print whatever is below that continue statement, right? So when the continue statement is called, it will go back to the top of the for loop. So it will not print I like banana. That will not be printed. It will go back to the top of the for loop. It will come back to orange, and it will ignore this if statement because that condition is not holding. Orange is not equal to banana, and it will print I like orange. And because you have exhausted everything in your list, it will stop there. So I like apple and I like orange will be printed. Right? Now let's say if you took the same while loop, right? So while loop, and what you did here is you put it continue. Now what do you think will happen? So while count is less than equal to 5, if count is equal to 3, continue, right? So anything below that will not get executed, but the loop doesn't break. It will keep on continuing. So what will happen? What do you think? Okay, so let me give the answer. What will happen is it will print 1, 2, it will skip 3 because when count is 3, it will simply go back to the top of the loop. It will not print it, right? And what will happen then? If count is 3 and you are continuing it, it is going back to the top of the loop. It is checking whether 3 is less than equal to 5. That's true. It will again check whether count is equal to 3. It will say continue. It will go back to the top of the loop, and this will keep on repeating for an infinite amount of time. Why? Because count is never becoming 4. This condition is never getting executed at all. This is below the continue statement, right? And in this particular code, we are not actually incrementally updating it. So if I run this, it will print 1 and 2, and you will see that there is an asterisk here, which means that this code is still running. So I'll have to stop this, right? Okay, so while loop runs indefinitely, what could you do to fix this, right? Fix. What you could do is, if you want to print 4 and 5 also, think about it for a second. What should you do if you want to print 1, 2, 4, and 5? Okay, make sure you're pausing the video, thinking through it, and then coming back to this. So if you want to print this, you should say if count is equal to 3, right? Before you say continue, you should increment it to 1, right? So, okay, it was not 1 to start with. So we should always put count is equal to 1, right? And this is continuously running. I stop this. Here again, before I run this, right? Why do I need to actually mention count? Because count has now taken the value 3, right? So that's the issue. So I want to make it 1 and then start. So we'll see it has printed 1, 2, 4, and 5, right? And this is the fix. All right. So we have covered loops. Now let's look at one more interesting example of nested loops. Nested loops involve placing one loop inside the other. This allows you to iterate over complex data structures like multi-dimensional lists or matrices. So remember, you can have a list within a list, or you can have a tuple within a list, or you can also have, let's say, a list within a tuple. So you can have these kind of a nested data structures. How do you actually loop over them? So what I have exactly here is a shopping cart variable with a nested list, right? A list which has 2 elements, and each element is a list in itself, which again has 2 elements each, right? So if you want to print basically each of these, right? Adding milk, adding bread. So I'm trying to print adding item to cart, where I want to print milk, bread, eggs, and cheese. I want this kind of an output: adding milk to your cart, adding bread to your cart, adding eggs to your cart, adding cheese to your cart, right? Probably in the first iteration, a customer added milk and bread. In the second iteration, they added eggs and cheese. And this is how you have stored this data in your backend, right? In your machine, you have stored this. And now you want to basically print what all they have added. So now let's see this nested for loop. So what I'm saying is for item list in shopping cart. Now, when I say for item list, now item list will become, this is the first value which it will take, and this is the second value it will take, because each of these is a single element of that shopping cart list. So item list will first become milk and bread. Then what I say is for item within item list. So item list has now become milk and bread, right? From the outer for loop, and I'm looking at the item within that. So there are 2 items, the 2 elements, milk and bread. So for each of that, so for it will first take item list will take the value of milk and bread, and then this will execute 2 statements, adding milk to cart and adding bread to cart, right? So this will get added. Now once it has exhausted, it will go back to the top of the loop. It will take the second element from the bigger list, the main list, which is eggs and cheese. So item list will become eggs and cheese. Now within eggs and cheese, again, item will take the value eggs first. It will print adding eggs to cart. It will then take the value cheese. It will print adding cheese to cart, right? So that's how this is working. Now, if this is a bit confusing, make sure you are watching this and just reasoning this out by yourself first. and then coming back. Now I'll give you a question. What will happen here? So if I do for item list in shopping cart, right? For item list in shopping cart, for item in item list, print adding item to your cart and then break. So what do you think will happen? What will break do? Will it break out of both the loops or just one loop? Remember, it will only break out of the loop within which it is getting called. So it will only break out. So here, break will only break out of the inner for loop, right? Because it's called within the inner for loop. So what will happen is item list will take the value milk and bread. Then it will try printing for item in item list. So it will take item will take the value of milk. It will print adding milk to cart. And then the next one is break. So it will break this loop. It will go back to the top of the loop. And then again, it will take the item list as the second element, or second list basically, within that outer list, eggs and cheese. It will take the first element within eggs and cheese, which is eggs. It will print that, and then again it will break. And because you have exhausted all your iterations, this will complete. This code will complete. So it will only print adding milk to cart and adding eggs to cart. Right? I hope this makes sense. If not, make sure you're watching this, you're experimenting with this in the PDF file that is there in the comments, and posting any questions that you have in the chat. So what we have covered today, just a quick recap, we have talked about control flow statements in Python. We have recapped the comparison operators. We have talked about the conditional statements, if, else, and else if. We've talked about loops, which is for and while loop. And we have talked about two loop operations, break and continue. And we have also looked at examples of nested loops. Tomorrow, what we will do is we will understand dictionary comprehensions and list comprehensions, which are very interesting ways of using these control flow statements within the data structures of list and dictionary. And we will see how that works and how that makes us more and more efficient for doing some of these operations. Stay tuned, and I will see you in the next session.